Ooh, subtitles.
Hello, everyone in internet land. Welcome to this very special episode of Verse and Vibe celebrating the incredible legacy of Neal Cassady. Verse and Vibe. We're gonna give everyone a chance to just join the broadcast and share with their friends. This is gonna be a very special 90 minutes we're spending together. We'll get to hear stories about Neal from the people that knew him. We'll get to hear even more stories that Brian has put together in an incredible original piece about Neal with musical accompaniment by the lovely David Amram, who you can see on the screen. We'll dive a little deeper into who everyone is once we have all the viewers lined up. So feel free to just kind of relax. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming in on this Sunday, joining us.
Great to be here.
So from top to bottom, I'm not sure how you all are seeing this, but I'm Rachel Ann, your host. And then we have Brian Hassett, who is my co-host and author and just a fantastic preserver of legacy. Then we have David Amram, who's a composer and multi-instrumentalist and was one of Kerouac's original collaborators. They actually performed the first ever jazz and poetry show together back in 1957. And here we are 60 plus years later, combining poetry and music. It's fantastic. And then we have George Walker.
Yeah, that's me down here in the corner.
There, lovely prankster, and Mary Microgram, aka Denise Kaufman, on the bus. And Wavy Gravy also joining us, very special.
Hippie icon, flower
hippie icon, poet.
Temple of accumulated error.
Director, created the Seva Foundation. Just his contributions to humankind are immeasurable. So we're so glad to have some fantastic luminaries here. We'll have Babbs joining us. We've got a video message from Linda Breen, and it's just going to be a very special afternoon celebrating Neal with his friends. So like I said, the first couple minutes, we're just going to wait and let everyone join the broadcast. George, I think we can see if Ken is working. Again, hi, Jerry. Hi, everyone who's watching. This is so great. I'm so excited.
It's great to be here today.
Let's see if we can get Babbs in. Denise, I'm going to pop you out, and we'll just pop you back in a second. So just, bear with me. Mary Microgram out.
I'm used to that.
Stay tuned. She'll be back. Let's try to see if we can get
you got
Ken.
Me still.
Yeah, I know we kept you. I let Denise go. Where is Ken? Ken, can you hear us or see us?
Babbs up.
Nope. So we'll keep working on his tech after we get the episode going a little bit. So, Ken, I'm going to call you on the phone once everyone gets started and take a moment to make sure we can get you in for your segment. So technical difficulties notwithstanding, I am just so honored to be here with so much history. And for me, creating this poetry show, for the beginnings and being able to have guests on it that were a part of creating this movement is really special. Yes, Wavy, what do you got?
Vonnegut said it best. History is a list of surprises.
And surprise, surprise. So again, we're just going to give everyone a chance to tune in. And if you haven't shared the broadcast, yes, with your phone, I'm going to do that right now. So everyone can see it. And so I can host my watch party. So I'm going to share it really quick on Facebook while we're waiting. Give me one moment. And if you guys want to create a watch party as well, you can just share the post on your Facebook page, and then it will create a watch party automatically. It will ask you if you'd like to create a watch party. So I'm going to do this because my mom likes to tune in, and if I don't create a watch party, she can't figure out how to follow the event, which I just think is so cute.
Not really sure how to start a watch party.
It's okay. If your Facebook doesn't give you the option for it, then you can just share the link. But we I think reached everyone. I also just put it on my page so you can share it from there. Hi, everyone.
I saw something earlier that said simply by putting it on your Facebook page that it would stream like that automatically, that you didn't have to do anything else. So
yep, you don't.
I think it's available.
Great. So I hope everyone is watching. Hi, everyone. Again, if you're just joining us, welcome to Verse and Vibe, a special episode celebrating the life of Neal Cassady. Very excited to have our special guest here today.
What's that?
And
We're going to try to bring a piece of Neal to life today.
yes, a well-deserved piece of life. So again, I hope that today you learn things about Neal that you can share with generations to come. And preserving legacy and telling stories is really the best way to honor someone's life. So I'm so excited to be a part of this today. Again, this is really special for me to be here. I promised myself I wouldn't cry because that doesn't look good on live broadcast, but the emotions of being able to help you guys tell this story and put something on the books for Neal and you, Wavy, and you, David, and George, and Denise is just super special. So thank you guys so much. So Neal once said, and I'm going to read this and I want to make sure I read it correctly. So I'm going to, my notes. So Neal once said, some events are in the area of the soul where words cannot penetrate. And I feel like these are the perfect words for what's going on in our world today. My soul aches for my Black brothers and sisters. And I know many of us around the world today share this sentiment. So I just want to give a love and hug and, send whatever I can out into the universe in my actions and my energies so we can start to make this right. And I'm so proud of all of you out there in the world that are really stepping up to make the change that needs to happen. So I just wanted to acknowledge that for a moment and thank everyone who's doing their best to make these important changes in our world.
Babbs!
We can't
Babbs,
get
are you there, Babbs?
No, we can't get Babbs. Let's try him
Come
again.
in, Babbs.
Come in, Babbs.
What's that?
He's here, but for
What?
some reason his audio isn't letting us connect him, so I'm going to have to troubleshoot that.
I can see him.
I know we can see him, but we can't. I'll call him on the phone once we get started. I've got to get
Did
the
he hear us?
episode
I thought we'd
going.
already started.
We will, we did, but hey,
Are
listen,
you
it's
knocking in there?
the
Don't get me
prankster way
started.
of things, George. It's the prankster way. Nothing's
Of course.
ever
Well, this
goes.
is exactly the prankster way. It wouldn't even be prankster-like if it weren't like this.
So that's really, really funny. So
It's rumored that we once did an entire show fiddling with the equipment, never to get it to work, and finally said, well, that's the show, folks.
Absolutely.
So speaking of something I'd like to show really quick, I like to put on these glasses every episode to show you a little bit of love and that I lead from my heart. So if you have anything around you that is heart related, besides the heart that's in your chest, I always like to tell people to feel free to share their hearts with us today and every day. So this is my way. Wavy, I know you've got a nose handy somewhere. Also, for those of you that
Right,
have your
send
nose
hearts
handy,
is really all about love.
those of you who
My
have your
nose
nose
is in my
handy.
chicken.
Oh, Wavy's got his chicken. And there's other toys in Wavy's bag. It's always fun when Wavy comes to a show and brings his bag of tricks.
There we have the chicken and a nose.
So let's kind of dive into, so the show format today is going to be a little different. We're going to spend the first 20, 30 minutes in conversation talking a little bit about the history and the times, starting back in New York with Neal's early years and David and Kerouac and Ginsberg. And then we're going to kind of move on to California and the pranksters and being on the bus. And it's just going to be a fantastic So where I'd like to start is actually with Wavy and David, two luminaries that were around in the beginning for the beat movement and for you're not old. You're I like to say well seasoned. You're seasoned. And we've got some conversation starters for you guys to kind of talk about and tell us what it was like.
It was oregano. And I paid $10 for it.
So, Wavy, I once read an article where you said that sharing a microphone with Neal Cassady was one of the great thrills of your life.
Oh, yeah.
Considering
especially comes to mind an event that Stuart Brand put together called Whatever It Is, where we actually had Kesey hidden in a secret room. And he would be speaking into the hall, and the police were all running around looking for him because obviously he's talking on a microphone. And Neal and I were on other microphones talking out. anything and everything, and bouncing words back and forth. I remember getting really pissed off at Neal because he didn't laugh at stuff. I said, Neal, I don't want to play with you anymore unless you laugh when it's funny. And he actually blushed, if you can imagine such a thing.
I can't imagine such a thing, but I thought that statement was super profound, especially since you used to walk around your old neighborhood with Albert Einstein when you lived in New York.
I was 5, Princeton, New Jersey, actually. And my mom would put me out for my morning airing. I looked a lot like a miniature Winston Churchill. And the good doctor said to my mom, could he walk me around the block? And my mom's flabber was totally gassed, and she just, and so he set up. We went around the block, and people were always saying to me, what did he say to you? And I was 5. I remember a shock of white hair that predated Don King by half a century. I remember a twinkle in his eye and sneakers, no logo, and a smell, an odor, which I've never smelled since. But someday I'll walk up to somebody and say, hey man, you smell like Albert Einstein.
So, David, you're a world-renowned composer for movies, The Manchurian Candidate, Splendor in the Grass, and about 24 others. But one of the first movies you ever worked on was a movie about the Cassady family, Pull My Daisy, which was also the name of a poem by Kerouac, Ginsberg, and Neal. So,
with Robert Frank.
So Larry Rivers played the role of Neal in the movie. So I was just wondering, how close did he come to the real thing?
Well, just before I answer that and say hi to everybody and all your listeners, Albert Einstein was someone that was really important to all of us. And our musical heroes included Stravinsky and Bartok, and Jack and I used to listen, and Neal also, to Dylan Thomas reading A Child's Christmas in Wales. So the portrait of all of us being a bunch of congenital morons that couldn't even finish a comic book certainly was appealing to some people, but it happened to be a group of people mostly, I guess you would call us self-educated, except we were in the University of Hangoutology and educated by every person who crossed our paths. And as I hit 90 this coming November, I'm still a freshman in the University of Hangoutology. And when I saw John Coltrane way back, just about the same time I met Wavy, it's sitting in front of the Cafe Bohemia, he said, man, what do you think of Albert Einstein's theory of relativity? And then I kept quiet, and he gave me a half an hour summary of what eventually became his basis for his writing Giant Steps. I just wanted to mention that since Wavy mentioned Albert Einstein, that was someone who was part of our life much more than
I was living in Princeton.
Much more than
Robert swept me up and took me around the block. At the same time, Orson Welles was on the radio saying the Martians had come. And my parents loaded me into the car, and we drove up into the hills so the Martians wouldn't get us.
Well, I should answer your question, too, about Larry Rivers. Larry didn't play the saxophone, but when we did Pull My Daisy, Jack said, well, since we're doing it in New York, we have no money, we're doing it at a studio. Larry, you just be you. And I said, well, look, Jack, I'm honored to be asked to write the music for it. I'm not an actor. What do I do? And he said, just be you.
Because we can see you.
That was my. Am I interrupting? I heard somebody else talk.
No, Brian is troubleshooting with Brian. I'm going to pop you out while David talks, or I'll just mute your mic for a second.
So I said I said, well, Larry's playing the saxophone. What do I do? And he said, just be you. So that was my introduction to the Stanislavski method. Even though I've written music for Lincoln Center Theater and Shakespeare in the Park with all these great actors, I realized you're just supposed to keep it for real and tell your story, and whatever you do in life, and certainly in music. Then later on, Larry was a wonderful guy. If he practiced, I think he would have been a genius musician. But since he only played whenever he felt like it, I thought we should do a little better for the movie. And I got Sahib Shahab, who was a great player who played what we did the concerts together with Thelonious Monk.
Wasn't it Robert Frank on the camera?
You know, Robert was just there with his tripod trying not to laugh too hard because all we did was try to, since it was a silent movie, see if we could get him to shake the camera by screaming with laughter. Anyway, Sahib came in and played it in one take, watching Larry's fingers, and played fantastic. I mean, he was one of the great saxophone players of our time. The film came out, I said, Larry, how do you like your saxophone playing in the movie? And he said, man, I never sounded better.
Ah!
So that leads us into kind of talking about the 50s and 60s back in Greenwich Village and at the Gaslight Cafe and at the art centers. What was it like during those times in New York with all this creativity?
Well, I evolved in the Gaslight, and Hard Rain's Gonna Fall was actually written on my typewriter. I had this little room up above the Gaslight where we all used to hang out when we weren't performing downstairs, and we would get delightfully altered and bounce off each other and make stuff up.
And the Kettle of Fish, which was right above the Gaslight, all the musicians who played there and all the musicians who wanted to play there and all the people who liked it would go and hang out. And there.
And a bartender named Arm, because he only had one of them.
Yeah, they were wonderful. And Folk City and all those places, and the Village Gate, where they had upstairs and downstairs, they would have a comedian, a jazz musician, and a poet. And it wasn't
performed at the Village Gate. And I remember one time I had gotten delightfully altered. Then I went on stage, and the microphone was set for Coleman Hawkins. And I actually thought I grew and became gigantic. So I did my set hunched over. And the only person that was laughing was the guy who got me altered.
Let me try Babbs to see if we can bring him in. Babbs? Babbs, we can see you, but we cannot hear you while Brian is troubleshooting you. Oh, there you are.
Did he speak?
Well, I'm here.
Yay!
Yeah, you are.
Hang up on the phone.
Yay, you can hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
You can hear me?
Hi, everyone. So,
Yay.
good tech support.
Hi, Babbs. You made it.
Yay!
I made it. I'm having a lot of trouble with my machine here.
Never early to the party.
No hurry to the party. So we were just reminiscing. Actually, I think about if I had a time machine, how I would really like to have gone back to those days and been there for some of these things and been in New York with all of you. So I think what would be great is to hear, since this episode is all about Neal, to give you guys a chance to talk about either your earliest memory of Neal or one of your favorites. And then we're going to get into more of the being on the road and on the bus with Neal. So just from the early days, Wavy, what's one of your favorite memories of Neal?
Well, my favorite Neal time is when I got to ride shotgun for Neal, and he would be doing like 6 things at once, like peeling a tangerine and rolling a joint and actually driving the bus also. And I would say, Neal, how about look out for that. And he'd go, that's all right, Wavy, and over there that way, and other stuff. And he would, it was thrilling. Never a dull moment shotgunning for Neal Cassady. As we journeyed down the road of peace that passeth understanding.
And George, I'm sure you have so many, and we're going to talk about some of them in the second half of the conversation. But if you had to pick one, like, do you remember when you first met him and the impression that he made on you, and was it instant?
I do remember. I remember it well. And the first impression actually was not favorable. I didn't know who he was. Nobody told me that he just walked in. We were at Chloe Scott's house. She had a dance studio, so it was this big room, and it was the party room when she wasn't doing dancing. So we were all just gathered around smoking joints and talking, doing what we do. And this guy walks in, and instantly, he's dominating all the sound. He's talking constantly, and I don't know who he is. Nobody said, "Oh, that's Neal Cassady," and I probably didn't even know who Neal Cassady was at that point. It was 1962, and he stood on a tall bar stool and stood there kicking the legs of the stool, waving his arms around and talking a mile a minute about I had no idea what. And I thought, this guy's the uncoolest person I've ever seen. But as days and weeks went by, I saw more and more of him. I found out who he was, and I got to know him. And I realized he was probably the coolest person I've ever seen.
Cool, but frozen solid.
Ooh, Wavy, I'm going to have to borrow that next time I tell someone they're super cool. Frozen solid. We're going to get that trending. And Babbs, what about you? When did you notice the spark in Neal? Was it instant? Did it take a while? Or did you instantly know this was someone special and unique?
Say that again, like you're breaking up.
Same question. When did you get to really know Neal, and was it instant that you knew he was someone special? Did that develop over time? So what was your first experience like with Neal?
I got it. Okay, yeah. I didn't really know Neal until he came on the bus as the bus driver in 1964. And we became good pals, but we had our differences at times. Like when he was trying to describe a four-wheel drift in a car, and he tried to do it with the bus, and all of us in the back of the bus got thrown from one side to the other. And I said, Neal, stop it. I said, you can do that. That's okay in a car, but not in a bus. I said, if you're going to be a bus driver, a perfect bus driver, the people in the bus don't know they're on the road. Oh, Babbs, I was talking about it. Stay, damn it. If you're a tourist, you're always coming in with something like that. He said, what do you know about? He became a really great bus driver. And the best thing about Neal was his rap.
Oh, Ken just took himself out of the studio. Oh, Doreen.
Well, he said it all. The best thing about Neal was his rap.
So speaking of laugh, we're just going to reintroduce our guests. If you're just tuning into Verse and Vibe, thank you so much. We're here celebrating the life of Neal Cassady with David Amram, who's to my right, one of Kerouac's original collaborators and a fantastic composer and multi-instrumentalist. Then we've got Wavy Gravy, who we could spend a whole show introducing, founder of the Seva organization, poet, speaker, just an incredible human being. Then we have Brian Hassett, who's the author and who's created a wonderful piece today. George Walker, another prankster. I think Ken is back. And speaking of pranksters, since we're going to kind of dive into Neal's later life when he got on the bus, David, I'm going to pop you back in the green room, and I'll cue you in about 15, 20 minutes to come back to start the incredible musical performance that Brian and David have put together for us. So, David, I'll cue you in about 20 minutes. Don't go anywhere.
I'll look forward to it, and I want to thank all of you who are tuned in, and especially for the young people. When your wonderful hostess says she wished she'd been then, remember Charlie Parker wrote "Now's the Time" in 1945. And when I said, Bird, what's it like writing something so long ago? This was 1952 when I met him. He said, man, now is the right time, because now was, is, and always will be the time. So for all of you and your whole generation of younger people that have gone out and supported the best of what our culture has to offer, all of us thank all of you, because we wish in our time we had had what you have now, and hopefully the little tiny bit of what you have is because of what we tried to do. So it's all beautiful and always the right time. And now my time is to go in the green room and listen to you guys.
And we will see you soon.
Yep.
So let me just make this quick change, and let's welcome to the broadcast Mary Microgram, since now we're talking about the bus. Yay! It is so great to be here with you guys today to talk and celebrate Neal and some of your stories about Neal. And I just can't believe it. For those of you out there, for me, I had come up with the idea for Verse and Vibe a while ago. I wanted to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Howl in a real live performance with like guitarists like Steve Kimmock and do this really special thing. And then it never got off the ground. But when the pandemic happened and all of us were at home, I wanted to do something to keep us connected and be able to create art. So I figured if I can do this in real life, maybe I could find a format to do it online. And since it's call and response, the latency issue of the internet really didn't matter. So the format's been working great. And I just want to say I appreciate everyone so much who's been tuning into Verse and Vibe. And Mary Microgram, Denise, we were on the phone when we came up with the name because I was trying to figure out what to do. And all of a sudden it just hit us. And Reed Mathis, quick shout out to you. He did my first episode with me. And was just like, Rachel, it sounds awesome. Let's do it. And I was like, okay. Oop, Ken, you just left us again. So hi, Denise. Welcome.
Hi,
Welcome
Rachel.
to Verse and
Hi,
Vibe.
everybody.
Hi, Denise.
Hi, Wavy. Hi, George.
Hi, Denise. I don't know if anybody out there actually knows it, but I actually put that name on you, Mary Microgram. That came out of some of the wild things that went through our heads in those days. I said, that woman is Mary Microgram. At that time, you were taking more acid than any of us had ever even thought of taking. We were taking doses in the few hundreds of micrograms. Mary Microgram was taking doses in the many thousands of micrograms and showing up at acid tests just as an angel floating
She became a
ethers, like glowing like the sun.
George, thank you for my name. I never knew
Mary
that.
Microgram, indeed.
You never knew that George named you?
No, because when Kesey, the week after I met Kesey and the Pranksters at Selamar at the Unitarian Conference, I was just there for the weekend with my band, and I was in school at Berkeley. I just finished my freshman year, and I was starting my sophomore year. It was in June of 1965. But I spent the weekend a lot with Kesey, and then I went back to Berkeley to go back to school. And a few days later, Kesey shows up at my house and says, "I've come to get you. You're coming on the bus."
Yes.
So I just left school, got in the car with him. We drove, and just as we were turning in to La Honda, where there's the sign that said "No turn left unstoned,"
Yes.
he said, "You have a name. It's Mary Microgram." We'd named you. So I didn't know that came from you, George. That's great.
It did.
And speaking of names, Denise, weren't you there when Ken gave Jerry his nickname Captain Trips?
Yes.
Wasn't that, how did that happen?
So what happened with that was at the Big Beat acid test, which was the acid test in East Palo Alto at this this club there called the Big Beat. We had it for the night for the acid test. And the Grateful Dead had just played a set, and they got off the stage, and Jerry and I walked out into the parking lot to just get some air. And the parking lot was empty, and while we were standing there, a police car drove up, and this one cop gets out of the police car and starts walking toward us, kind of like aggressively. And my first thought was, oh, this guy should not go inside the acid test. That wouldn't be great, you know. And he walked up, and somehow, I couldn't tell you what the words Jerry said, but as he walked up, Jerry did this like magical Aikido move, where he walked up, and Jerry was so kind of soft and sweet that the guy just like all of a sudden, all of that energy just went out of his body. And he just kind of said some little something to Jerry, and Jerry said some little sweet something back. And the guy just turned around and started to walk back to his cop car. And Jerry picked up he was wearing a little cap, and he picked up the cap and said, "Trips, Captain," to the cop as he got in his car. And it was like witnessing this magical transformation that Jerry had done. And I walked in, and I said to Ken, "I just saw the most amazing thing." And I told him the story of Jerry at the end was going, "Trips, Captain." And Ken turned it around to Captain Trips.
That sounds like a replica of a Cassady story, how he used to charm and disarm the cops anytime they came around.
Yeah.
I remember when the cops first showed up at the Watts acid test, which was kind of a grim scene anyway in an old abandoned garage. The cops came marching in with their sticks and uniforms and badges and boots. And Cassady went running up to him in a very defensive manner. And the very first words he said, "We never had any violence, officers. We never had any violence." And they were just like taken aback. The violence wasn't even in their thoughts. They were just, doing something. But Cassady saw that, and it just instantly disarmed them. And then he kept talking, and the more he kept talking, the more he took control. And then Babbs shows up, and he's a captain of the Marine Corps, and he takes charge. And the cops look around a little bit, and they're overpowered and outranked. And they just turned around and walked out, and that was it with the cops.
Mrs. Gravy, then Bonnie Jean, was our police commissioner, and she was also very much dealing with those police and charming them to shreds.
George, I think at the end of the very end of the Watts acid test, there was like a whole bunch of police there, like in like riot squad kind of. And at the very end, we kind of were packing up and everything. And at the very end, it felt like there was a coil of an animal, like the tail, and we were like gathering it all in and in and in. And at the very end, they grabbed Paul Foster. Do you remember that?
Yes,
I do. And he actually showed me the citation. They busted him, and he showed me the citation. And what he was arrested and charged with was lurking with intent to loom.
and he also shooting up.
That was the actual charge. He was lurking. He loved that. He talked about, that's why I remember it, because he talked about it for years. And he'd go into this thing and he'd kind of act like he was lurking and getting ready to loom out on somebody in a menacing manner and stuff. And we thought it was the most hilarious thing. And of course, no judge ever watched it, and he never did anything.
I phoned the police station. They said, "Oh, you mean the two-tone dude?"
Yeah,
He was silver on one side and another color on the other
silver
side.
and gold. He was silver and gold.
I remember cutting out his shoes, which were totally wrapped in electrical tape for a month.
Do you remember after that we headed to the Watts Towers?
Yes,
I do very much remember
and
that.
Neal at that time we were on, and I don't know why, but it was sort of like, for me, the acid that I took that night really started to come on toward the end. So by the time we were heading to the Watts Towers, I was like very altered, as Wavy would say.
We had overly massive doses of acid that night. I didn't dose. I had been doing all the dosing, and I knew what I was doing, but somebody else did something and dumped it in, and I think they miscalculated by a factor of 10. And so everybody that took a dose took 10 doses, and there were people that took several doses, and Cassady took a lot of doses. So he took 10 times a lot of doses, and he was unable to function, to drive by morning. So I was driving the bus. And he directed me, to back it up, turn around and everything. And he's standing right behind the back of the bus and watching, giving me motion like this, and backs me right into a light pole and then knocked it down on the street. Jerry has told this story about how then, nonchalantly and unabashed, he just motions me forward, and a couple of women come walking by, and he picks up the light post and he's holding it up and pretending to lean against it while he's actually holding it up while these women walk by. And then as soon as they're gone, he just drops it to the ground, and that was that with the light pole.
So,
and then we drove to the Watts Towers from there.
Speaking of Cowboy Neal at the wheel, go ahead, Denise, before I get to that.
I just wanted to say one thing to see if you guys remember that night, because Neal was sitting opposite me on the bus when we were driving to the towers, and he starts like pointing to my face and just going, "Oh my gosh." And I don't exactly know what he was saying, but he said he saw ectoplasm coming out of my mouth, which was like ghostly ectoplasm. And he was like totally sure that I was sort of like the channel for this ghostly ectoplasm. And he insisted on that for a long time. When we got back to San Francisco, he wanted me to go to meet his friend Gavin Arthur, who was Chester Arthur, who used to be the president of the U.S. his grandson, I think.
Correct.
And he was a mystic, and he had seances at his house in San Francisco. And Neal was like, "You have to come and do seance with me with Gavin Arthur. We can find out about that ectoplasm." And I was like, "No."
Okay, Denise, I know I happen to have the pleasure of also working with Denise and the lovely ladies of the Ace of Cups. So as far as you having some glorious heavenly ectoplasm, I could see that still being true to this day. Because the love
only
and
Neal
your words
saw
and
it,
your
let me
music.
just say.
Oh, well, I think we see it every day in the music and in the world you're helping to create. So that definitely right. So speaking of helping to create this amazing world, while we're waiting for Ken to come back, is I'm going to bring in one of my other special guests, Milton Rosenberg.
Hey, Milton, how you doing? Been a
Hi,
while.
everyone. It's awesome to see everybody's faces out there. It's wonderful. It was great hearing David's story, and everyone else in the panel are dear friends, and it's wonderful to see you all.
So Milton, for those of you that don't know, has spent a long time investing his own time and his own money in putting together events for the pranksters, to travel, to come together, to teach, to talk about their legacy. And I thought it would be important for him to come here and kind of maybe tell us why he's doing that and when did he get on the bus, and how he's decided to make it a part of his life. So Milton, first of all, just not only from me, from everyone that's had a chance to attend all of the events that you put on for free, thank you so much. You really do give incredible gifts to all of us by bringing people together and helping to preserve the legacy. So tell us, how did you first get on the bus?
Well, thank you, Rachel. I've been thinking about the answer to that question, and it's probably a pretty funny story, really. Back in the mid-'70s, we had a young man move from California to our little neighborhood in York, Pennsylvania, where we learned to smell that funny smell back by the dirt pile. And from that funny smell, I read On the Road, and I read Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, and I got very excited and aware of what was going on, and we got into the Grateful Dead. I went and saw my first Grateful Dead show as a 14-year-old, and the next year at 15, we rented our school bus that we took to school every day and paid the school bus driver to drive us all to the Philadelphia Spectrum in '79, where a whole busload of us that weren't old enough to drive were in fact able to go see our first show on a bus. And we put a curtain between us and the driver and had a field day in the back of that bus. And then over time, I realized how important the Grateful Dead scene was. And it was the first place I found where there were open minds that were interested in exploring alternative ways of living. And I met a tribe that had their arms open and knew how to interact with love and acceptance and a lack of judgment. And I felt like I had found my home for the first time in that tribal scene of the Grateful Dead out on the road in '79. And make a long story real short, after Jerry passed away and I wound up in Venice, I knew that the music had to continue. And I knew it had to be free when I saw the Rolling Stones selling tickets for several $100s a concert. And we were in Venice, and the gas house was continued out in Venice. Kerouac lived above the Sidewalk Cafe, and there's an amazing book called the Holy Barbarians that I'd recommend for people to look at. And we decided to carry the torch. And we started doing free shows, and it got bigger and bigger. And then George started coming, and then Denise started coming. And then I had the great honor of doing a free panel in San Francisco, and Wavy came. And we've been providing this as our offering to the community so that the future generation and the kids, like my own children, are able to perpetuate and keep this culture alive, continue to break the molds and patterns, and continue to learn how to go further. And kind of make the point, I'm actually sitting here in my Volkswagen bus that just barely took us here to Arcata and Humboldt safety. And here we are going further in a house without any of our belongings. and we're buying a new house and starting a new life, starting over in the Redwoods, which has called us. And we're now close to our friends up in Eugene. And I talked to Mountain Girl, who might be listening, who was interested in maybe talking with us today. And Mountain Girl's listening, and she's happy that we're in striking range. And I'm just thrilled to have the support and the love of the older generation as I try to help pass the torch to the younger generation behind me. And we keep all of this alive and we keep going further. And I think that's probably my story in a nutshell, unless there's any questions. But I sure love all these smiles, and I love every face I'm seeing. And to me, that's what it's about, is opening your heart, loving each other, taking care of each other, and breaking the mold to do what you need to do to have the best possible life. And now, as we go through these difficult times and society is in the process of rebirthing and the rainbow warriors are rising, it's time for all of us to reimagine what needs to happen and to put the pranksters in action in 2020 and do what needs to be done and take the whole world further with us. And I'm going to kick it back to my panel.
Amen. So I'm going to bring, thank you again, everyone.
I think Milton brings up an important point when he points out the thing about generations. This has got to be about generations. I'm among those people that he talks about as the older ones. Although when I look at David Amram, I want to say that as part of the younger generation, hell, I'm only 80, how much we appreciate the few of his generation that went before us, that led the way, blazed the trails that we followed, and how much we appreciate that they're still able to do this too. They're still able to come out and talk to us today and tell their stories and keep this spirit alive of whatever it was that struck the earth like a comet decades ago. But so grateful to people like David and Gerd Stern and people that were ahead of us. And I think of us as the younger generation. And then there's Milton, and there's another generation after Milton. And they're bigger and bigger. And what we need to do is to reach them, because if we don't, whatever we did was just a spark and it'll die. If we can get tinder into the real meat of who those people, all of you are, then we can light a fire and we can burn down some of the stuff that we need to burn down.
Yes, we're gonna burn that fire. So Milton, thank you so much for joining us. We're gonna wait for Ken Babbs to pop back in. And Milton, enjoy the rest of the show. Again, thank you so much for everything that you do and your tireless efforts to inspire and preserve. And we'll see you again soon.
Love to everybody, healing and health.
Rachel?
Yes.
Just to pony on to what George is saying about the next generation, I just want to mention Wavy and Johanna and Camp Winter Rainbow.
Yes.
Because for 40
Absolutely.
years, Wavy and and the Camp Winter Rainbow tribe have been seeding and nourishing the next generation, and they have,
and they've been doing it forever.
Yes.
40 years.
So, Wavy and John, thank you.
These kids give me nostalgia for the future.
So we're waiting for Ken to pop back, and then we'll have all of our pranksters. But Linda Breen, aka Anonymous, sent us a little message that I'm going to play. She couldn't be here with us live, so I'm going to share my screen, and you should be able to hear the audio. But let's see if we can make this happen so we can share the message that she sent in. She couldn't be with us today. And let's see what she had to say.
Hi, guys. This is Anon walking around my house outside. I won't be able to see you today, but I want to wish you love. I want to wish you happy and lots of fun. I remember Neal. You know I remember Neal, for whatever it's worth, and a 15-year-old. So, Brian, Turtle, Babbs, Walker, Wavy, all of y'all, you know I love you and I'd love to be with you. Mechanical phone thing, I'm not. So, from California, from my house to your hearts. Everybody, please enjoy yourselves. I am with you. I am with you from my heart. I will always be with you from my heart. My friends, my family, I love you so much. Bye.
Oh, that was so lovely. We're
Sweet.
just waiting. Thank you,
Thanks,
Linda, so much.
Anand. Sorry we missed you.
I think you're listening. I hope you're listening. Yes, she worked so hard for us to try to get her tech down, but with Wi-Fi and rural, and we just couldn't. Speaking of tech, I'd like to bring Ken back, who hopefully will pop back in, so you can tell us some. We have one specific story we'd like you guys to share, because in 1964, the two of you had the opportunity to be. Are you pointing at me, Brian?
No, I'm just pointing at the importance of the question. It's like, yeah.
So we want to hear, you and Ken were two of the last people to ever be with Jack and Neal when they were together for the last time. So we really want to hear a little bit about that important moment of history. And we'll just wait for Ken to pop back in, which he has not done yet. Brian, do you want to ping him? You see him?
Yeah, isn't that?
I don't see him.
Nope. Hi, Denise. Go ahead, Denise. What do you got while we're
Could
waiting
I
for
tell
Ken
a little
to come?
Neal story while we're waiting for Ken?
Yes, please do. Brian, you want to ping Ken again? Tell him to come back.
Well, I can't ping him, but.
So when I think of Neal, very much like who was saying this before? I guess it was George. No, it was Ken. What I think of mostly with Neal is all the many hours and hundreds, if not thousands of miles that I sat next to him on this little metal box next to the driver's seat on the bus and rode shotgun. And I would always do it pretty much with my eyes closed, because unless maybe you've heard Neal on tape or something like that, you have to know that it was like he wove everything about any moment together with his voice. And so it was like whatever experience that I had, and I'm sure others, of being anything separate, that there was anything separate in this creation, that was gone when you closed your eyes and listened to Neal. And because he would take every thread of everything that was happening, that would be what was coming down the road, what sounds were in the bus, what was on his mind, what everybody else said, and a honking of a horn or whatever it was. And all of a sudden he would just weave it together, and you were listening in the middle of this tapestry of presence and creation. And that was the only, I've never experienced that with any other being in my life. And so, when we're doing this to honor Neal, it's sort of, I don't even know how we can express that in a way that people who don't know him or weren't around him or haven't heard get a sense of what he was, because he was like a channel or a lightning rod through his voice and through his body for the oneness that everything is.
Well, I think when you just said, how do we honor him, Denise, you just did. That was really beautiful and heartfelt. So while we have Ken and George here, I heard that not only was Neal a great driver, but that he had some sort of magic wallet that would make the cops just disappear, because I guess he had 1,000 photos in it and used to open it, and as he was looking for his license, the cop would just not want to wait as he was going through all these things in this magic wallet. George or Ken, do you have any memories of this magic wallet?
He was always pulling something out of his wallet. Even years later, when we were in Mexico, a miraculous thing happened. We were living in Puerto Vallarta, down in a little house by the beach, and there wasn't much to do, really. So Cassady got into town, and he bought a copy of a news magazine to kind of check up what was going on back at home, U.S. News and World Report. And he's looking through it, and he says, and he threw it down. He says, "Bah, that's trash." He says, "I'm never going to buy that rag again unless there's an article about me in it." Well, there was. The next week, when it came out, there was a big picture of Neal, black and white, and a whole half-page article about the Beat generation. And Neal was like the star of the thing. And so he said, all right, that's the thing. So he took and he cut it out very carefully, the picture, and then around the masthead of the page. So he had this thing that he carefully folded and put it in his wallet that was his picture on it, and the head of the page with his name on it, and the head of the page, U.S. News World Report, and it's like this week's, and he carried that in plastic in his wallet. And when the cops stopped us as we were driving around Mexico, he would whip this out and he'd show it to him. And he'd hold this thing up, this picture of himself in this news magazine, and show him, point to the thing, and says, "It's me, it's me." And they look at him, and I will show you what we were driving.
Okay, so do that.
And
While you're
so
looking
That
for
was
that.
his driver's license.
So while he's doing that, the next thing we want to talk
This
about,
is what we
'cause then
drove.
we have to get to David
in
and
Mexico.
music. Oh yeah.
It's a Lotus sports car, and it was probably the fastest car in the country. And we were driving it outrageously, as you can well imagine. And so they knew that we were something other than the ordinary tourist. And when Neal, there's another better even picture of it. When Neal showed them that, and that he was this famous person, that they were writing about him, because they couldn't, it was in English, they couldn't read the English, the Mexican cops, so they just saw, this guy's important, and I've got what looks to them like $1 million car. They said, these people are important, and they just wave us on and tell us to go and have a good time and enjoy Mexico.
So speaking of waving, I of course
And we
have
did.
I have to keep really good time here, and we really want to hear this one last story from you and Ken before we go into the music portion of this incredible story and legacy, and David playing. And so Ken and George, Brian, I know this question was really something you were looking forward to, so why don't you go ahead and tee them up?
You guys, there's this neat thing that
You what?
scholars and academicians
You want that quote?
can put together
talking or
as to
somebody
how
else
the
talking?
Beats and the pranksters were connected. But there was an actual physical guy in the person of Neal Cassady. But that you guys, the pranksters, were actually at not just a party with Jack Kerouac and Neal Cassady. You were at the last time those two literary and cultural legends and Mount Rushmore heads of American culture. You were in the room the last time those two guys were ever in the same room together. And there's just, almost nobody left alive that was in the room for that monumentally historic event. So I just love to hear your take on what do you remember about being in the room the last time Jack and Neal were ever in a room together.
What two guys are you talking about?
Jack Kerouac and Neal Cassady and Ken Babbs and George Walker.
In 1964.
The party in New York.
I know, well. My computer is fucking up terribly and going off all the time. But I'm back now. But you were talking about the Beats. I fell in the crack between the Beats and the psychedelic revolution. We were too young for one and too old for the other. How's that for a sucker deal? The best, and we won't settle for anything less.
That's going to have to do only
Oh.
because as much as we could, and there he goes, as much as we could talk to all of you for hours and hours and preserve the legacy, Brian and David have put together an incredible musical piece for the life of Neal Cassady. So
I'll say one last thing about
Okay.
that party in New York. That was the only time that Kesey and Kerouac and Cassady were in the same room at the same time, ever. The
And
only time.
did everybody get along?
More or less. Kerouac was drinking. He had the beer in his hand all the time and sat on the couch and didn't say much and didn't seem terrible. That's him. Didn't seem terribly in a white shirt with a collar and didn't seem terribly impressed when Kesey tied the flag around his neck. And Cassady was standing there being Cassady and prancing around the room and talking a mile a minute and seeming a little embarrassed by the fact that this party wasn't the huge success that he had hoped it would be. And Kesey a little trying to impress and kind of failing, and me just along with most of the rest of us just kind of sitting back and watching and seeing what would happen.
Well, speaking of sitting back and watching, I invite everyone to sit back. I'm
Yeah.
going to turn this over now to Brian and David, who have been listening and waiting, and we've practiced, and this is going to be such a treat. So without further ado, may we present A Portrait of Neal Cassady, written by Brian Hassett and performed by David Amram. It is my greatest honor to present this to you. And I will be here to cue in some special guests that'll be reading some more. And without further ado, Brian, I'm going to turn it over to you. Why don't you start by saying a little how you created this piece, and we'll see everyone in a little bit. And then at the end, we have such a treat. David is going to perform for us with a sing-along at home. So I hope you guys will stick around.
Okay. A few things. One, right off the bat, I just want to do a quick shout out because I know people I've already been hearing while this has been going on from people in Sweden. So hello, Sweden. Hello, Denmark. Hello, Germany. Hello, England. People are watching this from all over the world, and that's a beautiful thing. When Rachel Ann got in touch with me about this, I hatched this idea about taking a collage of all, because I knew how the pranksters and David both knew Jack and Neal, and I thought, why don't I put together a whole bunch of the people who knew Neal Cassady the best and take all of their different words and put them in sequence. So, because people who are into maybe the pranksters and the Grateful Dead in the 60s know that part about Neal, and people who are into the Beats know that part about Neal, but not that many people have the whole duality of the story from the Skid Row Denver Neal all the way to his passing. And so that's what we're going to kind of present today. So Dave, do you have anything?
Yeah, I can begin by playing a slow version of the film called Pull My Daisy in 1959. And this was based on the song with lyrics by Neal Cassady, Allen Ginsberg, and Jack Kerouac.
All right, everybody, buckle in. Here comes the Neal Cassady journey, a portrait in words and music. From Dean Moriarty to dead immortality, the street kid who read was a legend in bed. But more than the lays, he inspired a blaze in the hearths of the writers pulling all-nighters. With Jack with his scroll and Keys with a bowl, there's that Cassady kid driving the id like he drove the bus with all of us, his passengers even today. The West Cassady grew up in, the skid rows and hobo jungles, the back streets of Denver, is a time and a place as remote as the gold rush. A 1930s America that exists today only in forlorn bus stations in small lost towns, the lonely Western experience of a vanished time. Among the hundreds of isolated creatures who haunted the streets of Denver, there was not one so young as myself. Of those dreary men who had committed themselves to the task of finishing their days penniless drunkards, I alone, as the sharer of their way of life, was a replica of their childhood, and in being thus grafted onto them, and I became the unnatural son of a few score of beaten men. Reading The Count of Monte Cristo had been my first excursion into extended thought and had given my imagination all it needed. Walking home from school, I became absent-mindedly lost under the influence of great daydreams following the threads of plot. The door swung open, and before my eyes once again was the gorgeous Joan Anderson, a second only to Jennifer Jones. Fresh from the shower, mirror-primped, stepped my heroine, resplendent in her new house coat. Geez, just when you think you've learned your lesson and swear to watch your step, a single off-guard moment will pop up and hope springs high as ever. Suddenly, the front door burst open, and in blew this amazingly handsome working-class hero stud with flashing blue Burt Lancaster eyes and a Kirk Douglas jaw and a Paul Newman build, stepping with comically elaborate carefulness over people's heads, coming on like some crazy conflation of Lord Buckley and Professor Irwin Corey. Carolyn was a beautiful woman, a classic beauty. She had finishing school poise about her that the other chicks didn't have. She was a woman. And when she first met Neal in her residence hall room, he was very attentive to her the whole time. And there was some serious flirtation going on. And then as we were leaving, we turned to say goodbye, and Neal held up 2 fingers and mouthed 2 o'clock, which was when he was going to come back and get her. Neal was fascinating to watch as he listened to music. He was passionately involved in every instrument, every note, every phrase, and he shared his delight by insisting that I become as engrossed as he, repeating nuances I may have missed, calling my attention to an impending riff, while his face glowed in a wide grin and exuded, "Ah, hear that?" Jack and Neal were as much fun to watch as to listen to. Both mimics, they matched their words with facial contortions, vocal gymnastics, wild gestures, and broke up in laughter at each other's antics. They both had infectious laughs, sort of a combination chuckling giggle, the deep, true merriment that travels from heart to heart. Man, the next thing we knew, we were blasting down Highway 17 towards San Jose. Suddenly, Chuck Berry's song came on the radio. Maybelline was an all-time favorite. My dad loved Chuck Berry. You guys know that out there in internet land? And it seemed like Chuck wrote his songs about my father's life. Neal would get so excited, he'd crank the steering wheel with the beat, sending us 3 kids in the back seat flying all over the place, knocking heads and giggling with delight. I first met Neal not long after my father died. With the coming of Neal Cassady, there really began that part of my life you could call my life on the road. And then suddenly, Neal jumped the car back to 70 and hunched over the wheel. He stared doggedly at Mary Lou, who was smiling serenely. This was the new and complete Neal, grown to maturity. I said to myself, my God, he's changed. Fury spat out of his eyes when he told of things he hated. And great glows of joy replaced this when he suddenly got happy, and every muscle twitched to live and go. High atop the pantry shelves sat Neal's tea bowl, his kicks plate with rolling papers and old roaches from 1951 and tweezers and bottles of seeds for possible future agriculture, settling down in a rose-covered cottage on a blueberry hill with Carolyn's white dress flying in the wind, while Neal runs like Jack and Jill up the hill to carry her across the threshold as the kiddies cheer. War will be impossible when marijuana becomes legal. Suddenly, boom, the door of Ferlinghetti's cabinet flung open with a loud crash, and a burst of sunlight illuminates the room. And I see an angel standing there, arms outstretched in the door. It's Neal, all dressed in his Sunday best in a suit. And beside him are several golden angels. And Carolyn, golden, beautiful wife, down to the most dazzling angel of them all, little Johnny, with the sun striking off his hair in beams. It was such an incredible sight and surprise that both McClure and I jump up from our chairs like we've been lifted up in awe, so ecstatically amazed, as though we've seen a vision. I never had a moment's trepidation so long as Neal was at the wheel. He was a natural driver, in tune with every atom of the car, which becomes an extension of himself. He was also one of the most relaxed and easy people to be with I've ever known, owing to an innate self-sufficiency. To us Tom Sawyers of the Eastern Seaboard, Neal was all the West, and the delicious promises the West holds out. Huge skies, tremendous distances, horizons beyond horizons, and new joys, new truths to match the mountains there. Neal was the perennial Peck's bad boy of our unsettled puberty, the Billy the Kid of Saturday afternoon matinee reveries, the Huckleberry Finn, half child, half man. Neal and Luann started to dance, and the room's attention pivoted to them. She clinging about his neck lithely with bare arms, her head to his shoulder. He gripped her hips with large hands and moved her to him and away, as though he had tapped a world of grace and abandon inside her and could direct it at will. Their feet barely moved, but the rest of their bodies weaved rhythmically, trance-like, as though in a swoon of dreamy surrender. The Perry Lane crowd didn't know what to make of Cassady. Here he is before us in Kesey's Versailles, coming on with his shirt off and his arms jerking and his abdominal obliques jutting out at the sides like a weightlifter's. We are hip. We value the wholly primitive. Only Kesey was intimating that one should learn from Cassady. He was talking to you, which he was. Cassady wanted intellectual communion. The connecting rod between the Beats and the Pranksters was Neal Cassady. He drove Kerouac's car and Kesey's bus. He was the guy. Neal was always doing 10 things at once and nothing twice. The Beats were the ones who poked the big hole in the proprieties of society in the 50s. Back then, what was proper and what was not was a huge deal. And the Beats were definitely improper. They weren't proper at all. Others can talk fast, but slow down its poppycock. Play Neal at 33, and it's interesting, voluminous, humorous, often rhyming, and intimidatingly encyclopedic in that he was enormously well-read and could handle simultaneously 8 channels of audio interchange, including items from all the radios and televisions he had on, random street noise, conversations within earshot, and several secret thoughts would all enter his fabric, the nap of his rap.
Neal's ghost has just spoken to Jerry Garcia driving his car alone late at night in Marin County in the hills. That voice! It wasn't just the voice that was so familiar, although the practiced timbre of his voice was unmistakable, just like Jerry's own sound on a guitar was inimitable. You might play Jerry's notes, but you'd never sound like him. You might talk fast and use Neal's words, but you'd never come on like him. And beyond just the sound of his voice, there was the cadence, like a jazz drummer's perfect timing, the expression of feelings worthy of a studied thespian, all the clearly implied punctuation as he crafted Proustian-length sentences wrought with phrases and clauses, all orchestrated into a grand, ongoing dissertation on a seemingly vast array of subject matter. There was no mistaking it. In some sense, this was the real Neal.
Gals, Neal said, we're dealing with more than show business when we talk about jazz. This is the music that both Martin Luther King and Malcolm X grew up with, you understand. The sanctified church is the foundation of most of what we hear. Jazz will always be the voice of our innermost dreams that we dare not utter and that these musicians articulate for us. Jazz tells us we can dare to keep on dreaming. When Neal drove, his wings were flapping and he just flew. It was like he was dancing on the gears and pedals. And he took me under his wing and I danced with him. Being with Neal and the pranksters every day felt like the first day of summer when you were a kid. No more pencils, no more books, no more teachers' dirty looks. I was finally living the life I knew had to be out there somewhere. Jack first told me so, then Ken and Neal made it a reality. Cassady was at the wheel of the bus, his shirt off, the sweat coursing down the deep rivulets between the bulging muscles of his back as he tensed and coiled over the steering wheel. He squeezed it like a health spa isometric machine. Ripples danced across his shoulders. He was 38 at the peak of his prowess. Not all that big. 5'8", 160 pounds, but lean, hard meat squeezed tight. Funky. Neal Cassady was in the garage flipping the hammer, rocketing about to his own Joe Cuba. Cassady was a monologuist, only he didn't care whether anyone was listening or not. He just goes off by himself if necessary, although anyone is welcome aboard. And he'll answer all questions, although not necessarily in that order, because, well, we can't stop here. Next rest area 40 miles, you understand. Spinning off memories, metaphors, hip literary allusions, all punctuated by, you understand. The pranksters threw a party up at the apartment on Madison and 90th and Kerouac and Ginsberg were there. Here was Kerouac, and here was Kesey, and here was Cassady in between them. Once the Mercury for Kerouac's and the whole Beat generation, and now the Mercury for Kesey and the whole what? Something wilder and weirder out on the road. Neal was moving about the room in a supple, twitching, soft shoe shuffle to the tempo of his own voice, shaking his shoulders in little seizures of dexterity, and tossing a key ring, a car key ring in the air, and catching it one-handed behind his back, and tossing it again, and gliding and turning beneath the spinning key ring like an improbably graceful St. Vitus or a sinuously spastic Fred Astaire. A vital part of his whole style, his style as an artist, was that his monologue wasn't at all fractured or fragmented or chaotic as I'd always supposed, but rather incredibly fluid. His rantings were in fact a kind of atonal scat singing, and he dealt not in mere subjects, but in themes, leitmotifs. He wasn't just prattling, just vaporing. He was making music. Escaping through the lily fields, I came across an empty space. It trembled and exploded, then left a bus stop in its place. And then a bus came by, and I got on. And that's when it all began. There was Cowboy Neal at the wheel of the bus to never ever land. Lost now on the country miles in his Cadillac, I can tell by the way you smile, he's rolling back. Blow the horn and tap the tambourine. Let's close the gap of the dark years in between. Cassady was Lenny Bruce, Jonathan Winters, and Lord Buckley all together, just for starters. He couldn't have helped but been a hit. But a nightclub format would have pinched his free-flying mind, and no stage in the world could have accommodated his art. His hurtling, careening, corner-squealing commentary on the cosmos. Except for the stage he built about himself the moment he slid all quick and sinewy under the steering wheel of a good car. The bigger, the boatier, the more American, the better. And the glow of the dash was his footlights, and the slash of the oncoming beams his spots.
If you closed your eyes and listened to Neal while he was driving, it was like your brain was being rearranged. He wasn't a leader like Kesey and Babbs were. He was just a phenomenon flowing through the whole scene, through everything. Mountain Girl and Bobby Weir and I were all 18. Neal was maybe 40. He might have been older in years, but he wasn't anybody's concept of old.
Cassady was such an overwhelming trip. He was so singular. For one thing, he was the best sight gag physical comedy person, and he had an incredible mind. He would do this thing, he did it to everybody, where you might not see him for months, and he would pick up exactly where he left off the last time he saw you, like in the middle of a sentence. And first of all, you'd go like, what the hell? And then you'd realize, oh yeah, this is the story he was telling me last time. It was so mind-boggling, you couldn't believe he was doing it. Neal was the closest thing to poetry in motion I've ever seen. Neal was the first person I met who he himself was the art. He was an artist, and he was also the art. And he was doing it consciously. He worked with the world. His face could go through millions of expressions and contortions, and his body language was so communicative. It was amazing. He was like a musician in a way, and it was an art form that hasn't been discovered yet, something between philosophy and art. In my life, psychedelics and Neal Cassady are almost equal in terms of influence on me. Neal was his own art. He wasn't a musician. He was a Neal Cassady. He was a set of one. He was it. He was the whole thing, top, bottom, beginning, end, everything. And people knew it, and people would be drawn to it. He was an unbelievable human being. The energy that he had and the vocabulary he had of gestures and expressions. Oh, boy, he was funny. I really loved him. It was hard not to be Neal after he was around. He was such a master of any social situation that you'd learn it yourself. And when he was away, it would take weeks before you'd stop being Neal. And this was true of all of them. He was such an original. He had such a dynamic life, and it was just packed. And he enjoyed the hell out of it. We picked up a lot from Cassady. He could see around corners. I don't know how to better describe it. And that's useful if you're playing improvisational music. You can build those skills to see around corners, because there are plenty of corners that come up. We gleaned that approach from Cassady. When he died, I told a friend we'd lit a candle for Neal. His response was, "Did you light it at both ends?" Delicate eyes that blinked blue Rockies, all ash. Nipples, ribs I touched with my thumb are ash. Mouth my tongue touched once or twice, all ash. Bony cheeks, soft on my belly, are cinder, ash. And now he's gone some 50 years, but his spirit's here, sinking gears. With every road and coat he sold, with every dead show joint that's rolled, with every joy and every turn of every trip and youthful yearn, Neal still beckons with his light, spurring others to try and write an epic life that's worth the sharing, an honest soul that's worth the bearing. It's who he's been since he hit the scene, from troubled Dean to Tiro Dean. He lived his life the speed he wrote and left us all a treasure trove of books and tapes and pics and tales, of girls and trips and friends and trails, still followed in the railroad earth that he and Jack bestowed with worth. So thank you now and thank you then for being a muse to women and men and reminding us when we wonder why to live life fully before we die. And we danced down the street like bingo duties. And I shambled after them as I've been doing all my life, after people who interest me, because the only people for me are the mad ones, the ones who are mad to live, mad to talk, mad to be safe, desirous of everything at the same time, the ones who never yawn or say a commonplace thing, but burn, burn, burn like fabulous yellow Roman candles, exploding like spiders across the stars. And in the middle, you see the blue center light pop, and everybody goes, ah. Thank you, David. And as Neal always told us, never knock the way another cat swings. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. Thank you.
Really, thank you, all of you, every one of you. That was great fun.
Yes, Dave.
Oh,
David, Brian, that was amazing.
Indeed, terrific.
Well, that was just spontaneous. I was getting all the feeling from all of you in the room. So even though we're separated technically, the spirit has nothing to do with geography, business, politics, or anything. When I spoke to Sonny Rollins 2 weeks ago, we're the same age. He said, you know, even though I'm housebound and I can't even play the saxophone anymore, I've never been happier in my life because I think only about the golden rule. He said, the body, we all turn to dust, but the spirit is eternal. So for all you young people watching, keep up that spirit. That's got nothing to do with anything. And we're also proud of you because the way your generation is behaving and finally bringing some liberty and justice and the spirit and the good feelings to the world. And we're proud of the way you do.
Eternity now.
Yes.
that was, so someone just posted in the comments, Wavy Davy. So David, I heard that Neal was the only person that ever called you Davy.
No, Jack
was the only person you ever let call you Davy. So if I may have that honor, can I just say I've got Wavy and Davy?
Absolutely.
Just once. And also don't forget, we are going to be treated to a lovely sing-along that David is to close out the show. But before we do, I appreciate everyone. Obviously, when Brian and I extended the episode by a half an hour, we probably should have thought that there is no way we can celebrate the incredible life of Neal Cassady in even 2 hours. So I think we got as much as we could in during that time, even though I'm sure there are hours more that we could celebrate and talk about. But before we left, I just wanted to bring you all together again.
I agree with that. I feel like we opened the door and we haven't even looked in the room yet. There's that much. There's that much to Neal that we've opened the door to look in, and now it's time to look around the room and see what we find.
Clown stereo.
And
yes.
I was lamenting that I didn't get to meet him in person before this episode, and now it's like total Neal Cassady FOMO. That if I had a time machine, there's a couple places I would want to go back, and getting a chance to dance with Neal sounds like something that would have been incredible. It was really interesting to see how some of these luminaries like Jerry and Phil and all these just incredible people that are creative forces of their own, the way that they were inspired by Neal and drawn to Neal. And I think that that's a testament to anyone's legacy, is when people that have their own legacies that are just as big and bold talk about how you affected them. So before we kind of went into the sing-along, and I'll put the lyrics. So the sing-along works like this. David is going to play for us, and at home, we're all going to sing along. Obviously, we won't be able to hear each other, but just knowing that we're singing along together, we will raise the vibration together, and it will be really special. But before we... I almost just want to sit here with the four of you. You too, Brian, of course. By the way, everyone, Brian put that all together. We had talked about an idea of how to celebrate Neal, and we thought that putting together the words of people that knew him would really be a special way to share that. So, Brian, thank you for all of that research.
That's what Brian does. Brian writes a book in 10 days. Really.
Before we,
Wavy so put a show together, sure. Do you want it by noon or what? He's amazing. Brian's absolutely incredible. He's the hardest working guy that we know. And David, so much appreciate you coming and blessing us with your music, man. It takes it to another whole level for me that you'll come and do this with us.
We are the living library of Neal.
Absolutely right, Wavy. That's part who
two.
Else? We're
That's part two. The living library
yes.
of Neal. We'll do this again. I apologize for the different pictures. They all were working before, but sometimes technology isn't friendly. So I'll put the pictures in the Facebook profile, and if you guys want to check out some of the old archival photos that we shared and see the whole pictures, I'll put that in the comments to the Facebook link. Again, I am so honored that we were able to bring these incredible panel of guests together today. And David, thank you so much. I'm so glad that we got to connect, and this was a really special afternoon for me, and I hope for all of you. And I think to end it, David, what is our lovely treat that you are going to be performing for us today?
Well, this is a great song called It's a Wonderful World. And Jack and I were sitting around Bleecker Street at a cafe with Richie Havens. And on the radio, we heard this fantastic song. And Richie said, man, this is supposed to be the summer of love. And I'd never seen so many angry-looking people because no one knew what kind of costume to wear. And, of course, the music industry had kind of exploited all the teenage dollars from everything. They didn't know what to do. But they said, well, you got to really be hip in the summer of love and not trust anybody over 30. And Richie said, man, he said, I'm over 30. I think I'm trustworthy. He said, Amran, you're almost 40. You're pretty trustworthy. He said, Jack, you're over 40 and you're trustworthy. Here's a guy in the 70s singing a song that's so beautiful. That proves that it was, is, and always will be a wonderful world.
So I'm going to post the lyrics. Sing along, everyone. Mute your mics, though, by the way. If you're in the studio with me, just mute your mic so we can see you sing but not hear you.
I see fields of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and for you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of white, clouds of sight. I may go through the dark sacred night, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, reflecting on the faces of the people walking by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do?
How do you do?
What they're really saying is, I love you.
I love you.
I hear babies cry. I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I'll ever know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself each and every day that when we're thinking of Neal Cassady and celebrated, we got to remember that it was Neal's way.
Yeah, man, go, man, go.
Tell their story and do something spontaneously right on the spot.
Oh, yeah, man.
Really didn't dig it. It didn't make any difference because if you were having fun,
Yeah,
that
you got
was
it,
really
man.
a lot.
You got it.
And that was
Yeah.
really all that you could wish for each and every day. So your listeners in Scandinavia or maybe even in Detroit, Michigan or somewhere near to you, we're thinking of you and you inspire us to continue to be creative and take what you do. Be supportive of all the later. And remember that every life is holy and every person's got some creativity. And we hope that what we passed on this afternoon will make you make your own liberty. And love thy neighbor as thyself. Don't forget all about that stuff too. Because it's been in all the good books of the world. So I guess probably after several thousand years it must be true. So from all of us until the next time, we want to thank Rachel and Brian and all the great groovy people, Wavy and the fabulous Mr. Ken, who I heard played the trombone at a wedding when they came up to the wonderful program in Nairobi, and nobody paid any attention. They had a live wedding, and Ken Kesey was the only famous writer who actually helped out all the kids, because in his heart he knew that what we're supposed to do, you dig. Well, since Shakespeare said the brevity is the soul of wit, I guess that's just about it, except to say when the sails of creativity blow in the wind and those sails are unfurled, just remember, whatever you read in the Sunday papers doesn't make any difference, because it was, always is, and since Adam and Eve left the Garden of Eden, things have been rough and the rents have been too high, but it remains a wonderful world.
Create your own. TikTok.
Great. That was great.
Semi-spectacular.
That was the extra lyrics.
All I know is, David, when I'm 21, when I grow up to be 21, I want to be just like you.
I want to be like you if I grow up. I always tell my kids, you know, you have to be responsible to, you know, to pay your, you know, all your stuff and get your kids through school and say please and thank you and be gracious. But maturing too quickly can be dangerous for the health. So everybody just got to hang in there and be kind and loving and groovy. And if you're lucky enough to live to be an older person, actually, it's a gas.
Maybe that's why I'm still healthy. I never matured.
Well, that's the thing. I'm not Solomon-esque wisdom of old age. That's because all the electrochemical synapses between the toenail to the brain nail get slowed down. So by the time something is a drag and it comes all the way up to your brain cells, you've already forgotten what it's about. That's why exactly our Solomon-esque wisdom is because we're trying to keep the battery from being extinguished. And that's cool too, because we're only here for a while. But as Sonny Rollins told me, the spirit lives forever.
We're only here for a while, and as Neal said, we're only here for the experience.
Amen.
And this has been quite an experience. Wavy, what is the secret you feel to the vitality that you carry with you every day and that you share with so many?
Kissing builds up your mouth.
It's fantastic. You know, if someone wants to screenshot this at home, this historic moment of Wavy and George and Denise and David and Brian, and it's just been incredible to have you guys here. I hope you take all of the love and kindness out into the world. And we love to end the episode with my favorite verse and vibe. So if everybody could show us their verse and vibe, David, Wavy, George, verse and vibe.
All right.
You got a fancy verse and vibe. Tune in next week. We have a really special presentation all about David Bowie, and we're reading T.S. Eliot, The Wasteland. So we're reading T.S. Eliot, The Wasteland with David Bowie and some great special guests. And then the week after that, we have the poetry of the Black Panthers, and we're going to dedicate an episode to some awareness. And we've got some really great episodes coming up. And this has been a fantastic pleasure. I can't think of anything else I couldn't think of anywhere else I would rather be today than here with all of you.
If you see a panther, don't answer. Ogden Nash.
I love you all. Namaste. Namasko. Namaste. Namasko. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
Bye, Bonds. Bye, Planes.
George had to get his kazoo in.